All right, we are live, and it's the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. I made a video about 9/11 2 years ago, actually, exactly. Released it on the 20th anniversary, and I figured since this is the day I react to stuff, maybe I should react to a 9/11 video. I was on Twitter, and both WTC7 and 9/11 Truth were trending. So it looks like the conspiracy theories about the September 11th attacks are alive and well, although they seem to be more rampant on Twitter now, which I guess no surprise considering how much Twitter has changed. But yeah, like I used to be really into the conspiracies. Like I follow them very closely. Watched all the documentaries back in the day, starting with Loose Change. So maybe we could react to one of those conspiracy type videos because, like, my video is just it's an explainer video. Speaking of my video, it originally it didn't do very well, and it's like one of the probably best videos I've ever made, in my opinion. I put a lot of effort into it. You know, it was something that I spent several weeks on, and I was proud of. But because it was age restricted, YouTube did not promote it initially, at least. But most of my age restricted videos are continuing to be censored, but this is the exception. The reason why they age restricted it is because I included a picture of the people who jumped out the window of the World Trade Center. And I kind of went back and forth on my decision to include that picture, but I ultimately think it was the right choice because you can't just, I mean, that's something that's really, it's you get a strong emotional reaction from people who see that, and I think they remember it more when you show stuff like that. Anyway, so good morning, good to see you. KU rules, nice. We got a local here. Good to see you there. Mrs. Beats behind me. Yeah, that's who you see there. 9/11 footage. We could just look at some raw footage, although I looked at quite a bit when I was making my own video. I'm taking suggestions today. It has to be 9/11 related. I was thinking about something to do with the conspiracies, which on YouTube actually they have done a pretty solid job of censoring 9/11 conspiracy content on there. It is heavily censored compared to the olden days. So I may just have to look on Rumble. I've already been kind of perusing it. Oh, yeah, no, I can link my video here. If you just search 9/11 explained, it should be one of the first that shows up. Yeah, looking on, looks like I already have a suggestion on Twitter. Oh, it's from the Corbett Report. I'm very familiar with the Corbett Report. Oh, it's an hour long, though. Well, we could watch part of it. Corbett Report. Okay. Any other suggestions? That one was on Twitter. There's one that just came out from a pundit named Kim Iverson. She interviews a guy named Kevin Ryan, where he is a somebody who questions the narrative about 9/11. Super Troopers reference there about the Pentagon. Ooh, okay, Pentagon specifically. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that that happened. Wow. That's crazy. Well, at least it was immediate then. That's what I mean. Any suggestions for well, I'm saying if you search 9/11 explained, I don't think Mr. Beast will pop up. Yeah, so there's the link there. She put it in the. Thank you, Mrs. Beat.
It won't let me pin it.
Yeah, the infographics here. I'll show you what shows up on my end. Actually, my own video popped up first, so that's good. So we've got the Brute America, which I'm familiar. I think I've collaborated with them on something in the past. The infographics show they just released one about it 4 months ago. Sky News, ugh. History Channel video still shows up. That was 12 years ago. That was on the 10th anniversary that came out. Currently, right now, what's going on is there's a memorial that happens every year. This one's specifically, there's one in New York, there's one in Washington, D.C. by the Pentagon, and there's one in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where the fourth plane crashed.
Edward Porter Belt.
A lot of, if you keep going, you can see the. This is interesting. Passenger live streamed video to say goodbye. I don't think I ever saw this one. Oh no, this was not 9/11. That was a different situation. All right. Any other suggestions here? Let's see, check Twitter. Don't see anything there. Oh, okay. Somebody said great idea. Love the idea, but what are we? Okay. Oh, I know your compared videos are about locations, but would you consider comparing the UK Parliament to the US Congress? Oh yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh. No, stop it. Well, I think let's just see what. Okay, here's a good old Rumble. We haven't reacted to anything on Rumble, but you got stuff like this. They don't have as much censorship over there, but because of that, you get the more out there perspectives. Do a video on the history of weightlifting. Okay, well, let's just check this out here. This was posted, I think, last night or a couple days ago.
And you can grab that in the link down below. And in the book, Kevin explores in a very fact-based way who could have been behind the 9/11 plot. And he mostly points to Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. And we're going to be
Yeah, you've got to have really good evidence to back that up. I have seen no evidence that backs that up. No credible evidence, I should say. Nothing that holds any weight.
chatting with Kevin tonight to explore these other suspects in more detail. That is coming up. I also want to mention that the International Center for 9/11 Justice has a film that is premiering called Peace, War, and 9/11. And it's about the deception behind wars and how to achieve peace, which couldn't come at a better time now that we're potentially staring World War III in the face. And that link to see the film is also down below. So before we get into our conversation with Kevin tonight, let's get to tonight's sponsors. Really excited about this one. Good knowing you're helping family fighting the meat. You're not getting it from NK every day and all the crap that goes down. And the truth is it does. It keeps me awake at night and it stresses me out. Unlike 75%
for safety, all sorts of materials. You'll see the UL signal or insignia on your telephones, your electrical equipment. So they test all sorts of products. I was the head of the environmental testing division. And what I learned shortly after 9/11, when the CEO came to our location in Indiana, was that the company had certified the steel components used to build the World Trade Center. And what I mean by that is they had done the fire resistance testing of the steel components that were used to build the towers and also World Trade Center 7. And of course, that work was done in the early 60s, long before I worked there. But, I had begun thinking about that over time, especially in 2003, when it was clear that the lead up to the Iraq War was based on false information, basically lies. And I wondered, if they're going to lie about this in our government, what else might they lie about? And it led me to recall the CEO of my company stating that we had certified the steel components. So I looked into that a little bit more and found that, we certified at UL the steel components to withstand hours worth of intense fire. And yet, some of these buildings fell, and one of them fell in less than 1 hour, 56 minutes. And officially, the investigation was leading toward an explanation of failure by fire. So what I did at that time is I wrote in 2004 to the NIST agency and asked them for more information about how this could happen, given that my company had tested the steel components and certified that they should have lasted longer. So, in retaliation for that, I was fired, actually, for sending a letter to NIST and copying other people, which led that those questions to become public. I was fired in 2004 for having done that.
Wow.
I still, I don't regret it. I've had quite a journey since then, but it led me to investigate 9/11 quite a lot more in detail. So, I was unemployed for a short while, and I spent a lot of time investigating and reading and learning that there were just.
I think to answer your question, this guy just admitted that he started to question the official narrative of the 9/11, or the 9/11 Commission is what he was hinting at, like the official version of events. After, the Bush administration lied about weapons of mass destruction being in Iraq, and especially being a imminent threat to the United States. That was a complete fabrication, absolutely, and it led to a huge distrust of the not only the Bush administration but the entire federal government. And then it was after that, actually, 2000 and late 2005, I think, maybe early 2006, when you saw the documentary Loose Change, which kind of opened up the floodgates for 9/11 conspiracy theories. I mean, the conspiracy theories, and remember what a conspiracy theory is. It's just first, what is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is more than one person getting together to secretly do something bad. So conspiracies happen all the time. There was a conspiracy to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. There was at least 7 people that were directly connected to his assassination. They secretly met, they plotted, and they also plotted to kill others in his administration. There are conspiracies that happen at the local level. Anytime you hear of like people getting in trouble, for corruption, fraud, or something like that, tax evasion, oftentimes there's more than one person involved, and they're hiding money somewhere and they're working together. That's a conspiracy. A conspiracy theory is just like the idea that there's a conspiracy, but we don't have good evidence to back it up. So really, it's kind of a misnomer. The better term is perhaps hypothesis, conspiracy hypothesis. Maybe that doesn't have the same ring to it. But yeah, a lot of people didn't start believing this stuff and these conspiracy theories, or at least start questioning the official version of events until 2006, and that's when I first kind of looked into it. I never believed any conspiracy theories. All I did was I questioned stuff. I questioned the heck out of stuff. I stopped believing the official version of events. That's what I did. And to this day, the 9/11 Commission still has issues. It still brings up stuff where it's just like, okay, there's no satisfying answer, but really there's never going to be satisfying answers on every historical event. So, I mean, there's just certain things that are just like, oh, that's weird. Like World Trade Center 7 is often like the most common example that people bring up, you know. And in my video, I briefly address it. You know, there's that, there's the BBC reporter who's like reporting that World Trade Center 7 had collapsed, even though it was literally right behind her. But that was just, you know, weird stuff like that can happen sometimes, and it can be just coincidences. But yeah, I mean, the fact that it came down so quickly despite not getting directly hit by a plane, it makes sense to me completely that the two big towers of the World Trade Center went down so quickly when you really learn the physics of it. You want to chime in here? Oh, she's just clearing her throat. Okay. When you look at the physics of it, yeah, the jet fuel made it so freaking hot, and there's just doesn't matter what type of building, even that would have you would have seen similar results. So anyway, let's see what else this guy has to say, but I'm probably not going to listen too much to him.
An enormous number of questions, unanswered questions about what happened on 9/11, and you've had one of my colleagues on the show before to talk about the demolition of the buildings. We feel like there is sufficient evidence that establishes the demolition of the World Trade Center towers as well as World Trade Center Building 7. I spent
No, there's not. There's not. I looked into it. There just isn't.
Years actually helping with the scientific evidence for that, helping to publish peer-reviewed articles related to the finding of thermite and thermitic materials throughout the World Trade Center dust. And
he's really doing the thermite thing. That has been debunked time and time again. Most famously, the Popular Mechanics team, they did a big special on, I think it was the Discovery Channel or one of those channels, where they demonstrated that thermite, like that whole thing was misconstrued. At the very least, at the most, some of the stuff they're talking about is just made up. Like it, for some reason, they're still running with it though. But if you look into the thermite thing, they always bring up, it's not plausible.
So
real quickly, Kevin, what's your background before you? So you're a chemist, is that right? Like, what is your science background?
Yeah, I have a degree in chemistry, and I spent my entire career managing laboratories. And so that's what I was doing at UL. I was the site manager at UL for the environmental testing division. And so we were testing environmental samples, but I was involved in these discussions and leadership meetings related to the NIST investigation that UL was helping to perform. And I continue to ask questions and help my colleagues understand that these were legitimate questions, showing them videos of the buildings fall.
Yeah, but you're not just asking questions, you're also providing answers, and that's the problem.
And asking how this could happen, given that we had certified the steel.
Right. So they claimed that the official story of 9/11 and why the buildings came down was that the fire melted the steel. Is that what they're claiming to this day?
Yeah, initially, believe it or not, when I first spoke out, that's what they were claiming. They were claiming that the steel melted. They changed the story to the steel weakened. and then they changed the story to the steel was just overwhelmed by the load that was put upon it that day. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about fire, because the buildings, as they
He's saying he's talking about scientists, many scientists who have analyzed this. It's not just, the government. Also, if they have changed their story, which I think they have, or they've altered it ever so slightly, is probably the better way to put it. It's because they were given new information. They made new discoveries. That's how science works. So he's talking about why they're talking about why the towers went down so fast, and that's a big sticking point for conspiracy theories about it. If you look, let's make sure I got the information in front of me. So the North Tower began to collapse an hour and 42 minutes after impact, which when it collapsed, it took out buildings next to it. Parts of it went, blocks away. It was in all directions, which is a big reason why World Trade 7 went down later, is because so much from the North Tower and South Tower ended up in, including stuff that was actively burning. That flew over from the two biggest towers to World Trade Center 7. So experts called it a, quote, progressive collapse, which is a type of collapse that happens when a building's structural elements are compromised. And then that kind of causes this chain reaction. So the impact of the planes damaging the support columns and spewing out all this jet fuel all over the buildings ignited all these fires. Temperatures got as high as 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So it wasn't quite melting, but the floors and columns were sagging. But it was so hot that aluminum from the planes were melted. So maybe that's what he's referencing. And then there was also molten aluminum from all this that furthered the chain reaction that led to an exothermic reaction. So it was like one thing on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, that led to the towers coming down so quickly. It was crazy. It really was unbelievable. It was good for people to question this so much, because it's like, this has never happened. In fact, it's never happened ever since. It's one of those things where it's like, wow, that's such a unique event in American history or in world history. So yeah, this was something that a bunch of crazy things had to happen in a row for this to happen, but they happened.
They were not able to deny the buildings were designed for the impact of large airliners.
They were.
No, that's a myth. No, they were not.
Architect John.
They actually
John
they actually thought about an airliner flying into one of these buildings.
Well, absolutely.
There was one report of that, yes, but that's not how they weren't, the entire team of architects did not have that in mind. There was no master plan of this. Just because it was brought up doesn't mean it was part of the overall implementation of how these buildings were constructed.
110-story buildings in New York City, and John Skilling was the name of the architect who designed the buildings, and he stated very clearly that the buildings were designed for impact of a large airliner.
That's a PR thing that he said. That was not part of the actual plan.
Wow. I could understand maybe them designing them thinking maybe a small private airliner might hit a building. That would make some sense. But a large airliner, do they ever fly that low?
Well, I'm not sure how low they might fly, but definitely the design included that. Wow. And, we know after the buildings were hit, they stood for a period of time. One of them stood, as you said, for 56 minutes and the other for an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you could tell that the building, just from the impact, was not tilting, or that these buildings were not tilting or leaning or anything. It was the fire that continued for a period of time that the official account says led to these buildings, the towers,
Yeah.
falling at near free fall speed.
But your company certified this. And I'm just thinking briefly, yeah, I guess airliners would fly. I mean, they obviously have to land. But it's just an interesting thought that an architect has to think about all of these various different scenarios of, yeah, I mean, planes oftentimes have like bird strikes. They have to turn around or, oh crap. I mean, airliners, the most dangerous time is when they're landing and taking off. And of course, that could be when something happens and they run into a building. So I suppose they have to think about that. So that's interesting that they did. And it's interesting that they said, yeah, it would withstand this. And then your company said, and the steel would withstand fire, right? And none of those things for 3 buildings, not just one. It'd be one thing if it's one failed, right?
They did withstand the fire. The problem, though, is they still sagged. There was a little bit of sag, and then that's all it took. Then it was a chain reaction after that.
But to have all 3 fail, that's a whole different level of, I mean, that's just, then they were not designed to withstand that, or something else happened, like a demolition of those buildings.
Yeah, the buildings were built in the 60s. At the time, the New York City Code required a tall building to have fire resistance of 3 hours for the floor assemblies and 4 hours for the structural columns. And those requirements were met. Not only that, UL, while I worked there, performed experiments in Chicago that tested different formulations, we'll say, of the floor assemblies. So they took floor assemblies, they designed exactly the same way, and they put fireproofing across all of it. And in some samples, they removed the fireproofing even, and they put these models in an oven, a furnace, and they tested per a standard.
Everything else is basically irrelevant because he's essentially saying that, well, the building couldn't catch on fire. This was impossible. But the plane itself was on fire, and the jet fuel was just keeping that fire going constantly and making it hotter and hotter and hotter. And that intense heat that I mentioned earlier, it was so hot. What was it? 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,000 degrees Celsius caused the sagging. And eventually the floors and columns all began to bow inward. Plus the molten aluminum. So, I mean, all of that is the evidence we have. I mean, it's pretty, I would say, scientifically pretty sound, that backs up why these buildings collapsed like they did. Okay, I got a couple suggestions on Twitter, so I'm going to jump to those. This first one is, it's a long video, so we won't watch the whole thing. It's 58 minutes, but this is from a guy, what's his first name? Was it David Corbett? I don't know. He's a Canadian who later moved to Japan. I followed him for a while, but he had a viral video, just like saying like, oh, well, the real conspiracy is the official version of events. That was back in like 2009 or something, or 2008. But this is a different one I haven't seen.
Al-Qaeda terrorist, September the 11th.
Al-Qaeda, 9/11 hijackers,
jihadist, terrorist organizations.
terror attack,
Bin Laden.
September
All right,
11th.
we get it.
2001.
Here we go.
Forget for one moment everything you've been told about September 11th, 2001. Instead, let's ask ourselves one question. What was 9/11? A terrorist atrocity? An attack on America? The first salvo in a new war? A day that changed everything? The question may seem simple, but how we answer it is of vital importance. It determines how we proceed with our investigation of that day. And once you strip away the emotional rhetoric and the fear-inducing imagery, we're left with the simple truth. 9/11 was a crime. And as with any crime, there is one overriding imperative that detectives must follow to identify the perpetrators. Follow the money. This is an investigation of the 9/11 money trail.
Well, he's probably going to mention the fact that the day before 9/11, September 10th, 2001, there was money that went missing. Donald Rumsfeld brought it up at a press conference. He was the Secretary of Defense in the Bush administration. Let's see if he goes into that actually, but I'm going to play this a little bit faster.
In 1998, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey agreed to privatize the World Trade Center, the complex of office towers in Lower Manhattan that they had owned and operated since their construction in 1973. In April 2001, an agreement was reached with a consortium of investors led by Silverstein Properties, and on July 24, 2001, Larry Silverstein, who already owned World Trade Center Building 7, signed a 99-year lease for the Twin Towers and Buildings 4 and 5. The lease was for $3.2 billion and was financed by a bridge loan from GMAC, the commercial mortgage arm of General Motors, as well as $111 million from Lloyd Goldman and Joseph Kerr, individual real estate investors. Silverstein Properties only put down $14 million of its own money. The deal was unusual in a variety of ways. Although the Port Authority carried only $1.5 billion of insurance coverage on the WTC complex, which earlier that year had been valued at $1.2 billion, Silverstein had insisted on doubling that amount, insuring the buildings for $3.55 billion. Silverstein's insurance broker struggled to put that much coverage in place, and ultimately had to split it among 25 dealers. The negotiations were so involved that only temporary contracts were in place for the insurance at the time the lease.
I just don't know why he's going into all of this about how the building was funded. I'm going to skip ahead.
As soon as the deal was announced, Silverstein sued United and American Airlines for a further $3.5 billion for their negligence in the 9/11 attacks, a claim that was struck down by the courts but is still on appeal. Perhaps even more outrageously, in a secret deal in 2003, the Port Authority agreed to pay back 80% of their initial equity in the lease, but allowed the Silverstein Group to maintain control of the site. The deal gave Silverstein, Goldman, and Kerr $98 million of the $125 million they put down on the lease, and a further $130 million in insurance proceeds that were earmarked for the site's rebuilding. In the end, Silverstein profited from the 9/11 attacks to the tune of $4.5 billion and counting. But that's the 9/11 insurance heist you saw. There was a much deeper, more complex, and well-hidden.
So you're saying that these guys wanted the towers to go down to collect the insurance money. Okay.
Heist that was taking place behind closed doors on September 11th, 2001, deep in the heart of the World Trade Center itself. Marsh & McLennan is a diversified risk, insurance, and professional services firm with over $13 billion in annual revenue and 57,000 employees. In September of 2001, 2,000 of those employees worked in Marsh's offices in the World Trade Center. Marsh occupied floors 93 to 100 of the North Tower, the exact area of the impact and explosion. In the year prior to 9/11, Marsh had contracted with Silverstream Software to create an electronic connection between Marsh and its clients for the purpose of creating paperless transactions. Silverstream had already built internet-based transactional and trading platforms for Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank, Bankers Trust, Alex Brown, Morgan Stanley, and other financial services firms that were later involved in 9/11, but this new project was unlike anything that had been attempted before. Richard Andrew Grove, the salesperson who handled the Marsh & McLennan project for Silverstream, explains.
In 2000, Silverstream was contracted by Marsh to provide a technological solution beyond what we had done for any of the above-named companies, insofar as it would be used to electronically connect Marsh to its major business partners via internet portals for the purpose of creating paperless transactions and expediting revenue and renewal cycles, and built from the ground up at the client's site. Silverstream provided a specific type of connectivity that was used to link AIG and Marsh & McLennan, the first two commercial companies on the planet to employ this specific type of transaction. And in fact, Marsh was presented with something called the Accord Award, ACORD, in the summer of 2001 for being the first commercial corporation to do so. And what you should take away from that is this. It means that no other companies were doing this type of transaction. So the question in your mind should be, what then were Marsh and AIG doing?
He's getting into the weeds here. I just don't understand. We're going to skip ahead again. So Silverstream, okay.
Was confirmed in a 2006 interview with Marsh's then Chief Information Officer, Ellen Clark. Richard Grove had been asked to attend the meeting, but was stuck in traffic on the way to the towers when the attack began. His friends at Marsh were not so lucky. 294 Marsh employees, including all of the participants in the conference call in the North Tower, died that morning. Meanwhile, the Marsh executive who had scheduled the meeting, the same one who had asked Grove to drop the issue of the billing anomalies, was safe in his apartment, attending the meeting via telephone. So what was the Marsh.com project really about? Why was it so important for it to be finished before September 11th? And what kind of transactions did it enable? More importantly, what information was lost when the data center on the 95th floor of the North Tower suffered a direct hit on 9/11 and the buildings were demolished? A partial answer comes from reports that emerged in late 2001 that a German firm, Convar, had been hired to reconstruct financial data from the hard disks recovered at Ground Zero. The firm talks about this work in its promotional videos.
September the 11th, 2001. The whole world ours was...
More details about the work comes from an IDG news service story posted to CNN.com in December 2001. Under the headline, "Computer disk drives from WTC could yield clues," the article notes, "An unexplained surge in transactions was recorded prior to the attacks, leading to speculation that someone might have profited from previous knowledge of the terrorist plot by moving sums of money. But because the facilities of many financial companies processing the transactions were housed in New York's World Trade Center, destroyed in the blasts, it has, until now, been impossible to verify that suspicion." A Reuters article from the same time,
So hearsay. Okay, great.
later posted to Convar's website, offers revealing glimpses into the investigation's early results. It quotes Peter Herschel, Convar's director at the time. The suspicion is that inside information about the attacks was used to send financial transaction commands and authorizations in the belief that amid all the chaos, the criminals would have, at the very least, a good head start. Of course, it is also possible that there were perfectly legitimate reasons for the unusual rise in business volume. It could turn out that Americans went on an absolute shopping binge on that Tuesday morning. But at this point, there are many transactions that cannot be accounted for. Not only the volume, but the size of the transactions was far higher than usual for a day like that. There is a suspicion that these were possibly planned to take advantage of the chaos. It also quotes Richard Wagner, one of the company's data retrieval experts. There is a suspicion that some people had advanced knowledge of the approximate time of the plane crashes in order to move out amounts exceeding $100 million. They thought that the records of their transactions could not be traced after the mainframes were destroyed. Was the revolutionary electronic trading link between AIG and Marsh being used to funnel money through the World Trade Center at the time of the attack? Were the attack perpetrators hoping that the destruction of Marsh's data center, on the 95th floor at the dead center of the North Tower explosion, would conceal their economic crime? One piece of corroborating evidence for the idea comes from author and researcher Michael Rupert, who reported in 2004 that immediately before the attacks began, computer systems in Deutsche Bank, one of Silverstream's other E-Link clients, had been taken over from an external location that no one in the office could identify.
Within, I would get...
All right, so these claims he's making here are all related to the fact that there was probably prior knowledge of these attacks. That's the assumption anyway. I don't know, maybe there were. Maybe there were, but that doesn't really back up much of the other conspiracy theories that circulate. So if somebody knew that bin Laden was planning something, they might have acted. There's also all these stories of like people that just didn't show up that day. Was it coincidence that they didn't show up, or did they know that the planes are going to be hitting the towers? I don't know. This is all, to me, kind of a waste of time. There's no evidence that this was for sure anyway. This is just like, it's a hypothesis. Again, and it's especially, we don't have any evidence that anyone in the Bush administration knew about this stuff ahead of time. So when we say that, like, that's a very common claim, for those who question the official version of events, they say the government was responsible, or at the very least, the government knew it was going to happen and they allowed it to happen. Let's jump ahead here a little bit.
There are at least two states, Iran and Iraq, which should at least remain on the list of potential suspects.
What kind of?
I don't recall anything like this. Pearl Harbor happened a month before I was born, and I hear my parents talk about that as a seminal event in their lives all the time. I am not aware of anything like this in the United States before. Americans are now, I think it's fair to say, really scared. Should we be?
This is
yeah, that was the point. That's why they call it terrorism.
Change our lives, isn't it?
It is a day that will change our lives. It's a day when the war that the terrorists declared on the United States, and after all, they did declare war on us, has been brought home to the United States in a much more dramatic way than we've seen before. So it will change our lives.
Okay. I'm not sure why he included that clip. Insider trading. Yeah, I've heard all these accusations before. Same thing. You have isolated instances of people that made trades that helped them and seemed to have the foresight that these attacks were going to happen. It's like they knew in advance. That's why they made the trades.
September 12th, 2001, before the dust had even settled on Ground Zero, the Securities and Exchange Commission opened an investigation into a chilling proposition that an unknown group of traders with advanced knowledge of the 9/11 plot had made millions betting against the companies involved in the attacks.
What many Wall Street analysts believe is that the terrorists made bets that a number of stocks would see their prices fall. They did so by buying what are called puts. If you bet right, the rewards can be huge. The risks are also huge, unless, of course, you know something bad is going to happen to the company you're betting against.
This could very well be insider trading at the worst, most horrific, most evil use you've ever seen in your entire life.
One example, United Airlines. The Thursday before the attack, more than 2,000 contracts betting that the stock would go down were purchased. 90 times more in one day than in 3 weeks.
Could it be members of Al-Qaeda? Huh?
When the markets reopened, United stock dropped. The price of the contracts soared, and someone may have made a lot of money fast.
$180,000 turns into $2.4 million when that plane hits the World Trade Center.
It's almost the same story with American Airlines.
That's a five-fold increase in the value of what was a $337,000 trade on Monday.
All of a sudden,
much younger Dylan Ratigan. Yeah, I used to like watching his show. Okay. Yeah, very good point. A very good point there. Bush did 9/11, yeah. Yeah, that's quite the meme. There's another video that I'm going to check out that was suggested on Twitter. So let's just, this is to address somebody's comment earlier. Oop, no, that's not it.
There were countless rumors about strange coincidences surrounding the events. One report about a group of Middle Eastern men spotted the morning of September 11th parked just across the river from New York City has not gone away.
So this is June 21st, 2002, apparently. And this would have been one of the earliest like videos we have that suggests like, oh, weird stuff's happened that maybe suggests that there was a conspiracy behind this.
Investigation of their presence has led to questions about whether Israel was conducting espionage on U.S. soil. We're joined now by ABC's John Miller with an exclusive report this evening.
That's right, Elizabeth. This is a case that took the FBI and the CIA more than 2 months to sort out, while 5 Israelis waited in jail. It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me.
Okay, one lady saw something, thinks she saw something. Okay, I hope we have more evidence than this.
You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells.
Okay, wait. So we have 5 people that allegedly were just celebrating that the towers went down. I actually heard about this. I remember this vaguely. And then, so the FBI gets involved. And then all of a sudden now we're like, oh no, they are working with the Israeli government. Let's hear that again.
Set off alarm bells. The FBI needed the answers to 3 with Israeli intelligence men were listed. Check of national security databases. Some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells. The FBI needed the answers to 3 important questions. Who were these men? What brought them to that parking lot on the morning of September 11th? And did they have any advanced knowledge of what was going to happen that day? The men said they were just taking pictures at the time. They said they worked for a company called Urban Moving. The FBI obtained a search warrant for the company's offices.
2 SUVs were filled up with between 9 and 12 boxes and computers.
Not long after the arrests, the offices of Urban Moving were simply abandoned. Almost everything was left behind. In jail, the 5 Israelis were repeatedly interrogated and given lie detector tests. Stephen Gordon was their American lawyer.
They were asked questions if they had ever been approached by or hired by any non-United States intelligence community.
While there is still some debate among American intelligence officials, many investigators believe some of the men were part of an Israeli operation aimed at monitoring radical Islamic charities that support groups like Hamas, something lawyers for the 5 men and the Israeli government strongly deny.
These 5 Israelis were not involved in any intelligence operation in the United States. The story is simply false.
In the end, the FBI concluded there was no evidence that any of the 5 men had advance knowledge of the September 11th plot. After 71 days, the 5 Israelis were deported, leaving some ruffled feathers among both U.S. and Israeli officials. According to federal officials, the 5 men have been barred from returning to the United States for 10 years, they say because they violated immigration laws.
Bottom line, John, is there any evidence any of these 5 men knew about the September 11th attacks before they occurred?
The FBI spent a great deal of time examining this question. It does not appear that they were in place taking pictures before the planes hit, but shortly thereafter. And they say they haven't uncovered evidence that any of these 5 men, and they did their backgrounds, they searched apartments, they telephone records and so on, had any advanced knowledge of the attack.
And while the FBI or certain sources might believe that, in fact, they were Israeli intelligence, they don't believe that the U.S. was a target, that they were actually investigating Muslim groups?
They believe if this was an intelligence operation by Israel, that it was focused on the Islamic groups and charities that raise money for groups that are considered by U.S. law enforcement and others terrorist groups. And you'll note that after September 11th, the U.S. moved on many of these groups with indictments, arrests, raids on their headquarters, something that hadn't happened prior to this.
These are groups that Israel believes have been funding Hamas and other terrorist organizations.
Groups that are responsible for most of the suicide bombings there.
All right, John Miller will have a full report. You can see it tonight on 2020 at 10 o'clock Eastern.
All right, yeah. So, my own video. So, yeah, kind of ridiculous there because we don't, you could just say, oh, well, the FBI, they're lying, but this just smells like anti-Semitism from some people that are saying, oh, yeah, they had prior knowledge. Well, we don't know they had prior knowledge of the 9/11 attacks. In fact, we don't even know if they really were celebrating dancing because of reacting to the 9/11 attacks. That's just one lady with binoculars looking out her window and what she saw. The fact that they have connections to Jewish intelligence agencies, well, the ambassador from Israel denied that, but let's say they did. Okay, is that evidence they had prior knowledge of the 9/11 attacks? No. So it's just a lot of people trying to fill in the blanks on their own when the evidence is pretty bad. So, well, hello there, Brando. I mean, that's the thing. You just have to suspend belief. There's a lot of people that just want to create this large narrative without evidence to back it up. And I get why we question the official narrative. It makes sense to question the official narrative. And the 9/11 Commission, which you can still read, it's all available, the commission report. I'll put a link to it in the PDF in the chat here. But yeah, it's boring, and also it's not satisfying, but it doesn't mean it's all lies. Did they get everything right? Probably not. But it doesn't mean that we have the answers, So we kind of just have to stop trying to create our own facts when the facts aren't presented. I mean, oftentimes we just don't know. We'll never know. Same goes with any of this, like the JFK assassination I'm making a video about. There's just a lot of stuff about it we'll never know, and we just have to be content with that. I think in the future, though, hopefully, now that we live in the information age, the internet making everything widely available, this will happen less and less, where we won't have people, I mean, that said, even like look at the COVID-19 pandemic, there's all these conspiracy theories about it, despite all this information that's widely available that people choose to ignore. So the bottom line is they've made up their mind. They believe what they want to believe, and they're just gathering evidence that supports what they already believe. It's a story so familiar to, I mean, we've all fell victim to it as well. It happens. Yes, I'm spitting. Yeah. All right. Yes. See, tying it to Israel is a stretch too, wasn't it? Didn't Trump used to like say there was like Muslims dancing on 9/11? Is that what he was? I think he just. Oh yeah, he just made that up. There's some footage of. Yeah, there's no evidence of Muslims dancing and celebrating after 9/11 as well. Maybe he even conflated the two. I didn't even think about that. I've seen most of it. It's very long. Yeah, I'm going to make sure I reference it again. All right, so I guess that's enough as far as me reacting. Don't forget, if you haven't checked out my 9/11 video, I think it's all right. I think it's pretty good. I released it exactly 2 years ago today, and here I'll show what it looks like. See, it may contain graphic or violent imagery. I mean, I learned about this, or I taught my. I learned about this. I lived through it. I taught my 7th and 8th graders about this, and I showed them this stuff. So anyway,
was particularly.
So yeah, I began the whole thing with TV, like, oh,
Katie Mattinell, thank you so much this morning. Good morning, everybody, again. For the second time in 2 weeks, the U.S. has lost an unmanned spy plane over Iraq. Iraq claims it shot down the remote-controlled Predator aircraft near Basra in the southern no-fly zone.
I'm Mr. Beat. This one gets personal.
That was right before the first plane hit the first tower. But yeah, that building behind me is no longer standing. It was demolished. No plane hit it, though. But that's where I was living on September 11th, 2001. And yeah, we'll never forget it. Yeah, they still have the Wikipedia. No, it's Encyclopedia Britannica there because there's so many conspiracy videos about September 11th that they've had to do that. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's really kind of you to say that. Oh, you're about my age then. How about that? Yeah, that was my first year at KU. All right. Enjoy your day. And I do this every Monday at 9 a.m. Central. So I got to go to the doctor now. Oh, update on the studio situation. You can see I'm still not in my new studio. But hopefully 2 weeks from today, I will be in my new studio. That's the plan. So fingers crossed. All right. Have a good week. We'll see you next time.